Okay, I'm gonna show how this was made in the video following, but just as a review, I made a square bowl out of a maybe 35-40 cent piece of 2x6 from Home Depot. They were $4 and something for an 8-foot 2x6. Cut those into 5.5 by 5.5 inch squares. What I did was I cut it with a Forstner bit on this side to mount it on my 2-inch chuck. I mounted it in this direction and trued up the surface. Cut this shoulder with a spindle gouge right there. The only places where I used a spindle gouge was that shoulder there to get into the corner and this shoulder here. I formed a tenon. I used carbide tools, a square carbide tool with a rounded radius to it, slightly round, so the corners don't dig in as much. Flatten this surface off, flatten this surface off, and then I made it proud here, concave a little bit so this doesn't stand proud, so it sits flat very nicely. And then I used my texturing tool or spiraling tool, depending on how you use it, and made the flower and these triangles here with it. And then I used my point tool, homemade point tool, that I just make some little, like the center of a flower, a couple lines here to just delineate the texturing, a couple there. I think I sanded this up to 220. I maybe went to like 400 here just to get rid of some of the excess stuff that might be sticking out there. Finished this side, got it completely finished. I cut my tenon a perfect size to fit into my larger jaws there. And if you have the right diameter, you can close these jaws around your tenon without marring that tenon. You can't see that my jaws have been on there, other than I let a little bit of some dirt or something in one of these grooves get on like a 1/4 inch section around here, but I sanded it off really quickly. Then I turned it over, mounted it here. I used my square cutter to come in from the outside to cut in and leave this shoulder here. Finished the shoulder up with my spindle gouge. Went to my go-to tool. If I had to pick one or two tools, I would pick my spindle gouge and that 8.9 millimeter carbide cutter right there. I can do 95% of everything I need to do with those two tools, except for smoothing things out. I use this to hollow the inside. The only time I use it flat, starting in the middle, going to the center, making a cone, working your way out to the edge. Then I switched to a 12 millimeter cutter and started rotating it on its edge and doing more of a shear slice in there with this tool. Left it just slightly rough, so I thought I would try a standard scraper with a burr on it. And I was able to get a little bit more of the little bit of torn end grain on this end grain section coming into the tool, but not significantly. I probably didn't need to do it. So I sanded it with my power sander to 120, or starting at 120. So it wasn't in need of a huge amount of sanding. I maybe spent a minute sanding that with my power sander with well-used 120, finished with 180 hand sanding, 220, and then I hit it with some 400. I went across the grain here to get rid of some of the cut marks that you'll leave from sandpaper in the center where it turns so slow. You just run across there. And then I put a rice bran oil finish on it, which doesn't yellow the wood much. It keeps it reasonably natural colored. A lot of finishes will turn your pieces amber, but that is the result, and the video on how to make that is following. I just hand rub this and then let it sit for a while and then wipe it off with a rag. Some of the oil comes back out a little bit, but just rub it back in. And that is a beautiful finish for next to nothing. That is cheap. And it's a beauty product. It is a skin softener product, beauty product. And it works great for this. And it takes no time whatsoever. So I can apply a finish in no time and be done. You can see that it gives it some chatoyance, a little bit of flash. I really like it as a finish. But anyhow, watch the video coming up and you'll learn some things, especially on how to use carbide tools properly. It's my mission in life now to teach people how to use carbide tools correctly and not use them as strictly as scrapers. That is like taking a Ferrari out and keeping it in first gear and driving it around at 20 miles an hour versus a 200-mile-an-hour machine. If you use a carbide tool right and use it in a manner that slices, and that's the 45-degree angle, that's tilting it just like you do a spindle gouge or a bowl gouge. You don't use a spindle gouge as a scraper. You don't use a bowl gouge as a scraper. You're slicing the wood. Well, if you turn this at a 45 and present it properly to the wood, you can slice that wood also. And I am going to do this over and over again until I get some people that understand it and hopefully get a little bit of an army going that will change how people use carbide tools. And they are going to love the experience. A carbide tool used as a scraper and just pushed in straight into the wood just leaves a nasty rough finish. Tilted at a 45, handle leading and handle dropped a little bit. Now you can slice that wood beautifully. Carbide is used in every sort of tool imaginable, from your miter saw to router bits to table saw blades to bandsaw blades to cut wood. And it cuts wood cleanly and keeps an edge much longer than high-speed steel. Do I love traditional tools and can I use them? Absolutely, I love them. But I've decided that there's so many people that start with carbide tools that just use them incorrectly, and the experience has got to it's not that pleasant. Yes, can you form a piece of wood? Yes. Can you do it without tearing the wood up and leaving severely torn up end grain? No, you can't, not using it as a scraper. But if it's done right, you can slice those wood fibers. The rule of 45 for cutting wood. If you're going to use a plane, you cant it. If I'm going to use a plane, I'm not going to run that plane directly into the wood like this with the grain. I'm going to turn it at a 45 and plane it that way. Okay? That 45-degree angle allows that tool to slice the wood, to cut it cleanly if you're going down grain. If you're going into end grain, it's always an issue. And when you have a rotating piece, especially on cross grain, you're always getting presented with end grain on two sides of the bowl. There's end grain that comes into your tool here and end grain that comes into your tool over here. This is side grain. That cuts real nice. It's this end grain that's hard to cut. But a new carbide blade on a carbide tool, these are cheaper, they are easy to obtain, and they are actually really easy to learn how to use in a slicing fashion, and that's what I'm trying to teach, to leave you some excellent finishes. And I will eventually show a video where I have done some sugar maple that is a very hard wood. It's pretty tight grained, but I have actually finished my pieces with carbide tools as a shear scraping finish. I scraped it in a shear scraping or shear slicing method, and I didn't even have to use any sandpaper. There's other projects where I've used 600 grit. I went from tool, carbide, not scraping, slicing. I went from carbide to finish, and then applied my oil or my finish on top of that. And I used a maximum of 600 grit. So I didn't use anything. I didn't use 80 grit. If you're using these in a scraping fashion and you're just tearing the wood up, you're going to have to start with 80 grit. Might even have to go to 60 grit to get rid of all your torn end grain. And then you've got to go to 120. And then you've got to go to 180, then 220, and then whatever, however far you want to go. Okay? But wouldn't it be nice to start at 400 grit? Wouldn't it be nice to start at 220 grit? Get rid of all your end grain, hit it with after 220, hit it with 400, or start with 400, hit it with 400, hit it with 600. Do that in 30 seconds and apply your finish. That's what's possible. And that is possible using carbide tools. I am not lying to you. My mom raised an extremely honest person, and I would not lie to you about something like this. I get extreme pleasure from doing this. This piece is, I'm going to use the word as gross as anything I do. It's as rough as anything I do. Maybe gross wasn't the word. But I do, if I get into some more valued woods, this is a less than a 50-cent piece of wood. I'm not going to take the care with this that I would with another, like $20 a board foot type material. I am going to treat that a little bit nicer than I am this. But look at that finish, and that's just an oil finish. There's no wax, there's no polishing wax on that. That's just an oil finish on bare wood with carbide tools. So when I tell you that carbide can cut cleanly and efficiently and leave you a beautifully sliced surface, I am not lying to you. Stay tuned. I'm probably going to make this into 2 videos just to keep them both short. The actual making of this will probably be about half an hour long with commentary and stuff, maybe not. And this is almost done. But anyhow, everybody, you take care and be good to each other. This is Scott, the Old Fart from Old Fart Wood Art, signing off. And I hope you liked this video as much as I enjoyed making it for you. Everybody take care and be good to each other again.